Hey there, welcome to this episode of Storage Academy Live. My name is Tommy Nguyen. I'm the co-founder of StoragePug, and Tyler Anthony joined me, and we broke down the current state of AI in self-storage, how self-storage operators big and small are using AI, and the ultimate impact externally and internally of AI on our industry. This was a truly, genuinely fun conversation. I'm excited for you to check it out. We all get to build the future together, so we might as well build a really good one. But check it out, subscribe if you haven't, and tune in. Come ready to learn, y'all. Hey, friends, welcome to Storage Academy Live, episode 2. I've got my dear friend Tyler Anthony, and today we're going to break down the state of artificial intelligence in self-storage. Tyler, how are you, man?
I am good. I'm happy to be here, and I'm going to immediately take away your host hat and put it on my head and give you the expert hat because today, folks, we're putting Tommy in the hot seat, as it were. For those of you that don't know, Tommy is a computer science major. Um, Amongst other things, also an entrepreneur, runner of multiple businesses. So he's the perfect person to be talking to us about this intersection of technology and business and how it affects us all. How you doing today,
I'm
Tommy?
good, man. Well, what a bio. I need to steal that and use that as my official bio. Thank you, man. Um,
Yeah, you have to give me royalties every time you say that,
every
though.
time
This
I
is
use it,
only
I
use the
will.
Tyler credits. I can't imagine there's a person in the audience that doesn't know you, but tell us a sentence or two. How long has Storage Pug been here? What are we coming up on? Almost 10
Yeah, we've
years?
been doing this for almost a decade, y'all. So StoragePug started in the summer of 2017. So we'll turn 9 this July, which is incredible. And really thankful, Tyler, you have been there for every step of the way. For those in the audience who might not know, Tyler and I have worked together at 3 different jobs. We've been friends for going on 15, almost 20 years, which is crazy to say out loud, by the way.
Nope. We're
Um,
not we're not gonna admit
we're
that.
not gonna
Those
get there.
numbers.
But yeah, so Tyler has been a huge proponent or a component and proponent of StoragePub from the early days, and we're proud to have him be our head of growth. And so, thanks for hosting today, man.
Yeah, it's an honor. And through that time, have gotten to watch a lot of technology change. Obviously the internet had been around, but just watching sort of the modern consumer smartphone, the evolution of the Google search page, a lot of things change just at large, but especially when I even came into the storage industry, I mean, the storage plug did. In a lot of ways, we'll find out today, online rental was kind of still new. Um, Before we get into that, though, so today is going to be all about AI. Some of our goals would just be to kind of catch everyone up on what it is, get some baseline knowledge for those of us that aren't techie people. Then we'll kind of zoom in and talk about its impact on the storage industry and our customers, particularly. Um, and then we'll wrap up maybe sort of suggesting some practical use cases, especially for our independent operators. A lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today probably really is applying or showing up at some of our like larger operators or the REITs just because they are at a certain size and scale. But we know a lot of you guys don't fit in that bucket. And so we want to talk about some things or give Tommy an opportunity to talk about some things that can be really practical immediately. And of course, at the end, there'll be time for Q&A. So be sure if you have any questions, throw them in there. If you have any insightful thoughts, put them in the chat. And throughout this, Darby's going to be spotlighting those as they are applicable. So first, let's dive in. And I'm going to ask you the baseline question, Tommy. What the heck is AI? As a computer science major, give us a little tech education. What are we talking
Yeah.
about here?
So we all in this room have been exposed, have used AI in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not talking about just logging into Claude or ChatGPT, right? So AI as a concept has been around really since the beginnings of computer science. Alan Turing famously published a book many years ago in the 50s, and that became led to something called the Turing test, which is ultimately it's a measurement of like how smart or how intelligent a machine or an algorithm is. So like this concept has been around for as long as computers have been around, right? But you know, there's a lot of myths or confusion or conflation that happens when you think of AI, right? Is it an algorithm? Is it just automation? Like, what is it, right? Or are these robots really that smart? And at the end of the day, how it applies today in for when we think of AI as an industry or as users, for the most part, what AI means in 2026 is large language models. So think
Mhm.
ChatGPT, think Gemini, think Claude. At the end of the day, AI is this umbrella term, but it really, for the most part, references is another word for large language models. There's other components of AI, of course, like machine learning. There's algorithms. There's all of these things that are happening, but ultimately, when we think of AI, for the most part, we're all referencing using it as another word for large language models.
That makes sense. And so, with that sort of large language model, is that what we're seeing show up? So we know that's kind of like maybe the front facing like user. Is that also what we're seeing kind of powering some of these softwares that we're hearing companies, maybe even outside of storage using? Are they using large language models too? Is that like a different kind of bucket of AI?
Yeah, it's an extension, right? So really, at the end of the day, a large language model is a branch of AI where it's deep learning, right? So basically, you've got these massive data sets, these massive databases that take in tons of data. And they vectorize the data to help the computer understand what this piece of information is. And at this point, we're talking billions or even trillions of data points, and that thus large language model, right? And it makes sense why why AI kind of got here, right?
Hmm.
Because we as humans communicate through language,
Yeah.
and so it made sense that we taught the computer to understand language. And the applications were pretty obvious, right? We think chatbots, we think content generation, we think translation. From language to language, we think software development, which is computer language or programming language,
Mm,
has the word language in it.
yeah.
Synthesis, summarization, all of these things lend itself very well to something that understands language. Thus, we created these massive language models. So that helps these big AI companies understand and create and transform language so that we can consume it and
Yeah.
understand it. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're really, it sounds like we're kind of at a tipping point. Like this has been happening, from my understanding, even, there's a spectrum. Like we've all been living in this algorithm driven world. And all of this is very predictive, right? It's like very
Yes.
predictive technology. All these algorithms we've been swimming in says, well, you're doing this and that on the internet. We know this and that about you from either data we've gotten or stolen or just from your digital behavior. And we think you're going to like this song. You're going to like this product. You're going to like this search result. And so, really, what we're seeing is kind of this extension of a road that we've been on, which is, hey, now with these massive data sets, we think this is the answer that you want based on this prompt that you've given, and we're able to query so much more than ever before. Um, so this is all happening in the background,
Hmm.
or in the front, in the foreground. So we're seeing it show up all around us. Let's talk. Let's dive right into its impact. So we know. Tell us like how, like we see AI in the news. Help us understand kind of how it's being used right now. And then very quickly we kind of want to move into like what is that? How is that changing people's behavior? What does
Yeah.
Shelley say here? I attempt to use AI, but usually end up down a random virtual rabbit hole instead of accomplishing my goal. So, Shelley, you're not alone.
That's
So
real,
let's talk
baby.
about how
Yeah.
people are using AI right now.
Yeah. So how people are using AI right this very moment really stems back to a big research paper that Google, of all companies. So Google, really from the beginning of time, Google's time, has been an AI company. They're really one of the first to lead the charge on machine learning, and invest a ton of resources and energy into developing a lot of the algorithms, and including the transformative paper called "Attention is All You Need," that introduced the transformer architecture. So when you think
Wow.
of ChatGPT, the T in GPT is transformer. And basically, it's the
Wow.
fundamental algorithm or technology that says, given this set of inputs, we're going to add learning and transform, and that's the transform part, and then predict the output, right, in a way that helps the user be happy or solve a goal or accomplish a task, or just give the customer or the user what they want. So when Shelly says, when she starts the AI rabbit, and then ends up not accomplishing her task, what most people today, and especially the group in this audience here, we're mostly thinking of logging into ChatGPT.com or logging into Claude.ai, or fewer of us are probably using tools like Gemini or Perplexity. The vast majority of our users, humans right now, interface with AI through more or less a chat interface. We
Mhm.
ask it a question or give it a prompt, which is the official term, and then it gives some sort of output back. And the output can be informational in nature, or sometimes, and this is the transition, is transactional in nature. But the vast majority of AI conversations or AI usage is informational in nature. And that's like, hey, I'm planning a research paper on AI. Can you give me the information? Or, hey, I'm planning a family vacation into Hilton Head. Can you do the research for me? Right? Or, when was something invented? These are the conversations that people are having with AI. And so, again, the vast majority of our usage is happening really through a chat interface. And of course, some of us have, iPhones and Android phones that have AI capabilities built into them in different ways, shape, or form. Even my new washer, Tyler, I got a new
Yikes.
washer recently, has AI built into it, which we have disabled because we don't really know what that means. But
Probably for the best
yeah, probably
until
for the
you
best.
know.
So
Don't
we all,
consider it.
we're
Right.
all exposed to AI in some way, shape, or form. But to answer your question more succinctly, the vast majority of users who interface with AI are doing it through some sort of chat interface. Again, whether it's Chat GPT, Claude, or Gemini.
So that behavior, what they're looking for, you said maybe the dominant usage is informational. Is that what you said?
That's what
They're
I said.
looking for some
Mhm.
information. Would the analog of that be, or the kind of comparison, like what is that replacing? Is that a Google search? Is
Yeah.
that kind of where they would have gone before?
There's really three true paradigms, right? So you've got informational in nature, you've got transaction, like I want to purchase something, right? And then there's true agentic, which means I have a set of tasks, go do them for me, right? And so that's like the next frontier that we really just like scratching the surface of. And I think ultimately that's going to be the thing that's going to be truly transformative for the economy, for our industry, for our daily lives. But yes, to your point,
Hmm.
so we'll focus on the informational part. Yeah, what that's really replacing is Google search. It's replacing going on Yelp or TripAdvisor and doing your research, right? It's replacing um uh these review platforms to understand what businesses I should work with or do, give my money to. It's also replacing a lot of research of like flipping through news articles to
Hmm.
educate myself on a particular topic. We've now really just used these AI tools as an answer machine or answer engine, right? Previously, we had Google as the premier search engine, and Google has seen this over a decade ago. Google saw, oh, really what people want are answers. They don't want to use our platform just for research and flip through clicking on links. They want to use our platform to get an instant answer. And so, with the invention of the transformer, and then a few years later, with OpenAI launching their public tool in November of 2022, I think that's why it got to 100 million users within 2 months, because for the first time in almost ever, we can now ask this little machine something and we
Hmm.
basically get an instant answer. Now, big star, big asterisk, big caveat there. The answer may not always be correct. And this isn't a doomsday conversation, but I think it's worth putting out there, especially as business owners, especially as people who interface with other humans and like do customer service or take care of people's belongings. There is still question marks about the validity and the verification of the data or the information that we get back from AI, right? So imagine a world before AI, which is going on 3+ years now, which feels kind of crazy to say. But let's imagine it's 2021, right? To learn about the goings ons in the world at that time, you'd have to get on Google and search what's going on with COVID-19 or
Mhm.
whatever the buzz situation was at that time. What's going on with the election, etc. And then you as a human are going to have to scroll through social media links, news articles, blogs, opinion pieces to gather and formulate your own opinion based on all of these sources, right? Fast forward in November 2022, you didn't have to anymore. You should still probably do that, but you didn't
Yeah.
have to, right? The easy layman can go and say, "Hey, I want to know about this topic." And then within seconds, you get what seems to be really good information about said topic.
Yeah.
But there's the question of verification of truth. And truth isn't some subjective thing, it's objective truth like facts. And so for a long time there, AI had a problem of the term was called hallucination, although it's getting much better than it was in the early versions of these tools. But hallucinations can get as bad as just making up facts. But then even when it was stating what seemed to be correct facts, it would cite imaginary sources, right? And so when you
Wow.
ask the AI to be like, "Hey, can you cite the source? Like, where did you get this piece of information?" Sometimes it would tell you, "I don't know, I can't tell you," or it might say, which is crazy, or it might say, "Hey, we sourced it from this particular research paper by this particular author." Well, if you Google that research paper or that author, you find out that that person and that paper do not exist. Right. And so that was kind of like the early state of generative AI. And so we're talking 2022, 2023, part of 2024. Now, the last 18 months and honestly, the last 6 months, we've seen these tools get tremendously better. And so, in our own usage here at StoragePug and my own personal usage, I'm seeing far fewer misciting of sources. And it's been ages since I've seen the AI just make up a complete, untruth or
Yeah.
false or a lie. It's weird to say that a robot can lie, but it's not giving me false information, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's really cool. There's a few things that you just said that I want to underline that feel especially valuable. One, hearing you talk, I'm just struck by what a variety of usage there is. Like when we're entering this AI conversation, not to suggest that anybody here is afraid, but I'll say I've been afraid. I'll make it personal. There's this kind of like big, broad impression of like, oh my gosh, everybody's using this. All these businesses are using this. This is quote unquote changing everything. Hearing you talk about the use cases, I'm reminded that people are there just to look up random information. Like there's so much stuff that's like, how much should I like? When is my chicken cooked? Like what's the
Yes.
degree temperature? Like there's just a tremendous amount of usage of AI that you were saying that was happening on Google before. That's just whatever information. It's there. People are just looking something up, not even news. Um, and there's you mentioned transactional, which we'll kind of come back to before. Generative is a whole other bucket of like saying, "Hey AI, will you do this thing for me?" And hearing you just sort of chart the progression, I'm reminded too that all these models are trained on the internet. And
Yes.
for any of us that like you were sort of you know mirroring or mapping out some like Google usage of the past, what we would do if you were looking for information, let's say 5 years ago, you look up something. If you see it on a fishy website, you go, I don't know if I trust this. Or maybe you would look at a few different websites, whether if it's a particularly important piece of information, you sort of check your sources. So not just does AI have the potential to sort of make stuff up, it can aggregate stuff or synthesize stuff that it may not even be true, like its original source material. Like we know the AI is frequently, ChatGPT especially, frequently grabbing comments from Reddit posts, which if y'all
Yeah.
don't know what that is, that's just internet open forum. Anyone can type anything. So it's just a discussion. It's like overhearing a conversation from a neighbor and then reporting it as a fact. It's like, well, I heard, you know, this. So I think it's just good to really sort of break apart AI usage into these buckets. Um, Storage Plug, some of what we've been sort of saying is like thinking of it as more of like external impact of like how is it affecting our customers and consumers, like how is it affecting how
Mhm.
they shop and use the internet and search and do all the things. And then there's an internal component, which is, how am I using it in my business, or how are my competitors using it, or how are other storage businesses using it, which we'll come back to. But just to kind of offer that as a framing for our audience when we think about AI's impact. Because if you look at it as just one big giant thing, it's just not. It'd be like saying the internet. It's like, well, be specific. Like we have to be specific about these conversations, because otherwise, uh, we lose all the fidelity. We just have to, make it very contextual.
Mhm.
Um, so, you were talking a little bit about, we talked about informational usage, and you started kind of referencing discovery.
Yeah.
So that feels like something that's maybe especially pertinent for our audience. How are people using AI right now to, let's say, find a local business? Like if they would have in the past gone to Google and typed in storage units near me, what does that look like now in the day of AI? How's it happening? What are we seeing?
Yeah, I think, and I love the framing, right, of the internal versus external impact. And the external is, when you think about it, another way to think about external impact is, what are your customers doing, right? And not what they're doing when they're not. It's helpful to know what they're doing in general, but it's really helpful to know what they're doing as it relates to their journey to find your business, right? And so ultimately, another third way to talk about external is, how are you generating revenue with AI, right? And so it helps to start with the customer journey. And today, and I see the note here from Brett, who says, "Still today, I use Google search for short, quick answers like pizza near me, storage near me, how many F-15s are at Seymour Johnson AFB." Very interesting, Brett. And but he al- but ultimate but conversely, he uses AI when I need a more in-depth answer, like how to improve my Google Ads, image generation, growth options, etc. Right? So Brett, even though he owns self storage, he's also a consumer, right? So
Mhm.
here he is as a consumer telling us that he is still going to traditional Google search to find local businesses. And the data backs that up. And the REITs are realizing that as well, right? We chatted with some of the REITs, and we have quotes from the CEOs of Extra Space and CubeSmart, where they specifically talk about their marketing strategies. While they're AI aware, the vast majority of their energy and almost exclusively their revenue or money is being spent on traditional internet marketing, which is code word for Google Ads, right? And
Yeah.
so the vast majority of local search is not is still happening in Google as of 2025, so far in 2026, and we anticipate that trend will continue at least for the next 18 months. Once we introduce transactional capabilities and agentic capabilities, I think those trends will change. But in the current state of things, what we're seeing in our data from last year is less than 0.1%. So a tenth of a percent of all traffic.
Point zero, like
Point zero
point.
one, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh, that's
crazy
how
low amount of people.
crazy low amount. So when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of visitors per month, we're talking like 200 of those are coming from an um, AI sourced tool, right? And so that's incredible to keep in mind. Like, yes, all this is interesting and all this is exciting potentially, but at the end of the day, consumer behavior, there's always a lag, right? And part of consumer behavior is kind of dictated by industry behavior. For example, Tyler, you mentioned earlier, like when the early days of StoragePug, when we started a decade ago, the stat was less than 10% of storage operators offered online rentals.
Wow.
So if you can guess, well, guess what? There were less than 10% of all rentals came from the internet, right? Because the industry was not ready for it, right?
Yeah.
And so, yes, we want to keep an eye on consumer behavior, but on the other hand, we also kind of want to figure out what's the future that we want as in our industry. And so the industry kind of has to lead in a certain way, right? And so nowadays, it's very rare to see a self-storage operator not offer online rental capabilities. And
Mhm.
even the REITs, right? The REITs for the longest time they weren't anti-internet, but they were anti-online rentals. And oftentimes the reason cited was our managers do a better job of closing. We
Mm.
can generate more revenue by selling ancillary products. We can sell insurance. Well, guess what? All the REITs since 2018 have committed fully to online rental capabilities. And shout out Life Storage, who was acquired by Extra Space, but shout out the executive and tech team. And we actually got to meet with some of these
We did.
with these guys who and the gals who were in the room when this happened, which is actually really cool. Tyler and I did a interview recently with one of the original tech people at Life Storage, and he shared about how they built it and like the goings ons at that time and the problems that they were trying to solve. But the iPhone was launched in 2007. Online rentals by the REITs did not was not launched. They couldn't do it until 2018. So it took our industry 11 years to adopt that technology. Corey said in the comment, we did online rentals in 2014. So you're an innovator. You were an early bird, baby,
Ahead
and
of the curve,
way
Corey.
ahead of the curve. But anyways, I guess what I'm saying is it's really important for us to know what our consumers are doing and put walk in their shoes, put the lens on, but at the same time understand that the impact is so marginal that it's not even a rounding error. It rounds to zero,
Yeah.
right? If you round 0.1%, it rounds to zero. So it's not was it a 2025 concern? No. Is it a 2026 concern? It's March 2026. We publish this probably tomorrow. My answer could change, right? Because the
Right.
state of things are moving that quickly. But some of the things to watch out for, right, is what is the advertising revenue or the pay to play option? In traditional Google search, I can get in front of all my customers by just bidding higher and being in front, right? I can skip the line, so to speak, right? And so instead of having to rank really high in those traditional 10 blue links or rank really well in the map pack for local results, I can just skip the line and pay for an ad. And now I can pay for an ad that shows up above the other ads through
Mhm.
local service ads, right? So Google is this beautiful, if you're a capitalist, Google is this beautiful money printing machine, right? Multi-trillion dollar company who's just made the most beautiful business model known to humans. Now that said, it's not that OpenAI or Anthropic or Perplexity. It's not like these groups aren't blind to that. And in fact, there's a philosophical approach, right? Anthropic has very openly said from the beginning, and so far they've held to this, is we're not going to monetize through advertising.
Hmm.
I love that stance. As a user, I really love that stance. OpenAI has wavered. They've kind of gone back and forth, and OpenAI, they're in the news a lot more. They're the much bigger company. They were the first to launch a public interface, ChatGPT, and so they just have a lot more press and they have a lot more eyeballs on them, and so they've gone back and forth. And as recently, the most recent news is they are going to be launching a pay to play option for
Of course they
and
are.
so when I talk about right. So when I talk about consumer behavior and then industry behavior, well, industry behavior is going to dictate what consumers can do. If in the near future you can advertise on ChatGPT for anyone who asks about self-storage, well, that's going to lead to consumers more likely to click on an ad and then result from a rental from AI,
Yeah.
right? So that said, the stats from 2025 were pretty very apparent to us that we don't if you haven't done anything with AI, you don't have to worry. That's just objectively the truth. So you might hear other folks say if you're not adapting or if you're not adopting, you're going to be left behind. That will be true, but it's not true yet. In 2025, the data proved that it's okay. Even the REITs agree to that.
Yeah.
2026, the data, the trend line for AI usage is definitely up and to the right. I do want to call that out, right? So, like, if it was 0.1% of overall traffic in 2025, already so far this year, it's like 0.25%.
Mhm.
Still rounds to zero, but you can see the growth rate is nearing exponential growth rate, which I think is a big deal. Not which the audience, the people in this audience, and who are potentially listening to the replay, y'all care about this stuff and you want to
Mhm.
be in the know. And our take is it's not a it's we're definitely not at terminal velocity from a industry consumer interface perspective. Like, we can not think about AI for 6 months and we will still be fine. If you're
Yeah.
at 94% occupancy today and you don't care about AI, you will probably still be at 94% occupancy 6 months from now. And you heard that here, right, at Storage Academy Live. But that said, I think you should be aware, you should be curious, and I think you should be mindful and thoughtful. And in fact, when we interviewed some of the biggest operators in the industry, that they mirrored that sentiment of like, we like this stuff, we care about this stuff, we want to know how it's going to impact our business both internally and externally. But we're cautious.
Mhm.
We're not diving all the way in until we know what the path looks like, because we don't have rules of engagement.
Yeah.
Right? And when I think of rules of engagement, I think there's 2 sets of rules. There's, like, the legal legislative rules, which always lags technology, but there's also, like, the morals and the ethics of it. Those 2 things sometimes are in sync, but sometimes they're 2 different buckets, right? And so right now, there are almost 0 rules of engagement. Anyone can do anything that they want. It's the
Yeah.
wild, wild west, truly, and it reminds me a lot of how people talked about the internet in the early '80s and '90s, right? Tyler and I grew up in the '90s, and we had dial-up internet. Tyler, I'm sure you had dial-up internet,
I
right?
did.
Yes. So the little modem and all that kind of stuff. So that's the generation we grew up in. But when you hear about people talking about the internet of that time or read articles, it's like it was the wild, wild west. You can do whatever you want. And
Yeah.
then rules of engagement were created. And again, both moral and ethical rules and guidelines, and then legislation, right? And to that point, we're talking like cookies and privacy laws and all these kinds of things, right? And so we don't have any of those for AI. And
Mhm.
and depending on which country you live in, that country may not care about these things. They just want to bulldoze and steam ahead, right? Which I think is a pretty something interesting to be mindful of.
Well, thank you for all that. I mean, it's an amazing kind of outlook overview of where we're at. Something that you said that I think is really important to underline is to pay attention to what our customers are doing. Um, Even we were kind of prepping for this conversation, and obviously it's been a rolling topic for months now. We were reminded of some numbers from the SSA demand study, which reminded us that still at least half of, on average, at least half of people finding a storage facility is not through the internet. It's through seeing a physical billboard, seeing the facility, driving by, stopping by. Why is that, y'all? Because it's storage. I love you, but it's for most people not the main part of their life, and hopefully not the main part of their week or even day. And so they're probably the way that they're thinking about it is different than you. And so think about how long the internet has been around, and now we just sort of reflected on how long online rentals. Still, a bunch of people are just like, oh yeah, there's one on the corner. I'll just drive over there. Um, Still like half, and we're an internet people. We're an internet company, and online rentals are all we talk about. But that's just the truth. And it reminds me when I even look at my own life that I interact with different industries in different ways. So I don't just have a blanket personally, like a blanket digital behavior of like, oh, I do all these tasks always in the same place. Like the way I bank is kind of still physical. Like I like going to the bank. I don't know why, but I still will bring my checks to the bank. I don't know why I do it, but there's just things like that that me as a consumer or customer will do. And I think we'll continue to see that the ways that people interact with different industries, and especially storage being such a physical industry, it will continue to have those impressions. And so I think it's just important to remember that. Another concept I heard in what you were saying, I'm just obviously reminded of change, of
Yeah.
how, like, if you've joined us anytime before, you've heard us sort of talk about and remember the evolution of marketing, and the yellow pages and how Google was early on, and then, the influx of Google business, used to be Google My Business. All these different tools and technologies have shifted and shaped how consumers are shopping. Um, and often, what you hear us at StoragePug preaching when we're talking, having marketing conversations, is something along the lines of, um, a kind of like just being making sure that what you're putting in is what you're getting out. That there's something
Mm,
about a sort of like reciprocal energy
yeah.
that, to pay attention to, not just like all the different channels, but like the weight of those channels. That's why we're often saying, like, yeah, storage is what it is. Social media is there. You should be on social media. Maybe don't spend every day on social media. That's often not where people are shopping, like sometimes. And what I hear you saying about AI is that we're still very much in the sometimes category, not the always
Yes.
category. And, um, something that I just know to be true, and even hearing you talk about, is even if people are starting to find and shop for storage through AI, that doesn't even necessarily mean that businesses have much they can even do to
No,
affect those results.
that's right.
So maybe, like, talk a little bit about, before we move on to maybe some operational stuff, like some of the nuts and bolts of like the AI search results as we know them. Like, what
Yeah.
were people seeing? And,
Well, you
you know,
you said 2 things there that I really love before I answer that question, of like, just the results from AI search, right? But the one is your banking analogy, right? So my family, we committed to Ally Bank all the way, so we don't have a physical bank. This happened probably 5, 6 years ago because for us, we never went to the bank. But that said, our business banking relationship is local. We bank with Pinnacle Bank, and we love Michelle. We love all the folks we work with over there. And that said, I think there is, you said change is happening, but I also think there's the adoption curve, but there's also, like, I don't know what you would call it, but the curve of letting things go. Right?
mm,
We all have friends, and sometimes they're older, but sometimes that's just what they grew up in, who still love the radio, who still love, right there. I mean, there's technologies that come, but then different people adopt it at different speeds, but then some people let it go at different speeds. Right. And so that adds to like the complexity of the soup of how do I navigate this world, this internet, right? So I think that's an interesting reminder, is like, just because a lot of us are talking or using this thing doesn't mean that everyone is. And then also, just because a lot of people are ready to leave some things behind doesn't mean that everyone is leaving things behind. And then your second point about don't give it more than it'll give you. It's like, yeah, sometimes the juice isn't worth the squeeze, right? And it's not an overnight thing. An example of the juice or the don't give it more than it gives you is the yellow pages.
mhm,
We didn't all as an industry decide to turn off yellow pages overnight. Oh yeah, tomorrow is Friday, March 27th. Let's all turn off for yellow pages. No, there were some operators who left it early. Those were the innovators. Those were the early adopters, and they completely got excited about Google, and at that time probably Yahoo and internet, and then Bing came along, right? But there were still hangers-ons of yellow pages, right? Up until probably, I don't know, 2014, 2015, as recent as 2015, we know of operators who are paying Yellow Pages thousands of dollars per month to be wherever Yellow Pages ads were ran. It's
yeah,
already been 2 decades since I've opened a phone book, so I actually don't know where ads are displayed. But my point here is, as it relates to Google, as it relates to what do we get excited about or need to recommit our energies to, is just because a lot of people are going to adopt AI doesn't necessarily mean they're going to leave Google or Yellow, or not Yellow Pages, Yelp, or any of the other
mhm,
platforms. They're not going to leave it behind overnight. And I
yeah,
think that's worth paying attention to. So to that point, AI search results are non-deterministic, meaning if I ask AI, hey AI, or hey ChatGPT, or hey Claude, I'm looking for a storage unit. I want something secure, something that's safe, something that can fit a 4-bedroom house. And I probably need it for 6 months, and I need it next week, right? The AI response, if you ask that same question 10 different times, you're going to get 10 different results. 10 very highly varied results, which is very different than what we're used to with Google
Yeah.
search, right? And well, there's two
So
things
you're not gonna be ranking number 1 in AI.
no, there's that concept doesn't truly exist. Not yet anyways, right? Again, there's pay to play, and I know ChatGPT is gonna be the quote unquote pioneer of advertising through the interface. Uh, uh, Much to the dismay, I think, of consumers. But that is just capitalism, baby. But my point here is I can ask that. There's two things different here. One is I'm not likely to ask a very verbose question to Google,
Hmm.
right? I'm way more likely to just be like, not even use full sentences, not even grammatically correct clauses. I'm like, yo, storage units near me, right? And I'm
Yeah,
actually,
maybe even have your voice mode open and you're just talking at it.
yeah. So I'm not, yeah, so that's one thing that's very different is I'm giving Google way less context than I am AI. That's just the facts. The second thing is the results that I get back are very different. Google, if I ask Google the same query or the same search or the same question 10 times, the degree of difference is going to either be zero or very minor, right? The standard deviation is very low
Hmm.
for my searches. Now, of course, if I search and Tyler searches, our results might be varied. But if Tyler searches 10 times and I search 10 times, our sets of results are going to be very similar for within our
Yeah,
own.
we're probably gonna see about the same 10 or
There you
15
go.
facilities, and they're gonna have kinda comparable orders or
That's
rankings.
exactly right. Where with AI, depending on your prompt, depending on the which tool you use, and again, you can search the same question 10 times. You can do this right now for the folks who are listening live or listening on the replay. Just open a new tab, go to chatgpt.com or claude.com or claude.ai and just ask the same question 10 different times and you will get 10 different results that are very varied. And sometimes you'll get a map, sometimes you'll just get a list, sometimes you'll get one result, right? Like Claude might be like, hey, I know you. Whatever I know you means, I know you, and I think this is the one for you. You need a
Yeah.
rent at Rocky Hill Storage, period. No other options, right? Other times you might get a list of 4 or 5 options. You might get a list of 10. And sometimes you might get a list of 10 or 4 or 5 with information about each facility. And sometimes you're like, no, here's just the 10 facilities that we found that matches what you search for, right? And so there's all these varying degrees of responses. And it comes down back to that technology that Google, that research paper from 2017, that transformer. It takes in all of these inputs and it's going to guess at the best answer and it's just going to do its best. So that's why it's non-deterministic. I can't get Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini to give me the exact same answer every time.
Yeah.
So knowing that, how does that impact? So what, right? So what if that's the truth? How that impacts me as a storage operator is I need to know. Well, first I need to just admit that I
And
can't
there's,
be.
like, setting expectations
There you go.
functionally. Yeah.
I can't be number one because there's no concept of that. That concept doesn't exist in
It's
this
like
new
every
world.
user has their own little custom results page that might have 1 result, it might have 5 results.
There you go. However, here's the so what. Both, well, I keep referring to primary Claude and ChatGPT, but Gemini falls in this as well. All of the major LLMs and AI search tools are going to allow you to ask them for these sources. And in fact, if you're on ChatGPT, every time it gives you local results, it automatically gives you sources, which helps you verify. Right. Remember, I said earlier, there's this concept of hallucination and the concept of these tools just making things up. With local results, the amount of hallucination is it's not zero, but it's very limited. It might be limited to what it knows about the business, but the actual business that it tells you, you can almost guarantee that's a real business. Right. So that said, you can ask for the sources, and the sources will tell you where it's coming from. And so the so what here, if I'm a storage operator, is I need to know where and how these AI tools are sourcing their information.
Mm.
So, in the case of ChatGPT, it's way more likely to source from Bing. When it does a web search, it's web searching as if it's using Bing, not Google. So if I rank well on Google and I don't know how I rank on Bing, you may not know how you rank on ChatGPT. Claude, for example, it has its own version of web search and its own version of sources, right? And so knowing where and how these tools are sourcing and referencing data on the internet, that's my input. That's how I can influence the results. Is if I know that it's always looking at Storage Cafe or it's looking on usstoragesearch.com or these tools, and I need to make sure that my business is mentioned on those tools, right? If
Mhm.
I know that ChatGPT loves to reference bird eye, well, all of a sudden, and I'm not necessarily stating this, I'm just saying
Yeah.
what if theoretically. Well, if I know that it references bird eye, I probably should investigate it. If I know that it references Chamber of Commerce's, well, guess what? I should probably investigate that. And that is actually a fact. ChatGPT values and sees the authority of government websites and local Chamber of Commerce's pretty high. And so if your business is referenced on Chamber of Commerce, your county or your city's Chamber of Commerce, that gives you a little bit more authority to the eye of the AI than if you just had your own website, right? So much of the results that come from an AI search comes from third party sources and not first party sources. What I
Mm.
mean by that is you might have the best website that has all the best words and it's just the best. ChatGPT may not care about that because it's not looking at your website to formulate its answer. It might be looking at historical past training data, or it might use web search and look at other sources that are not your website. And so, just because you optimize your own website doesn't mean that that's enough. So that's a pretty big deal. So I think the
Yeah.
the, the big takeaway, the so what's, is if I'm a storage operator, I care about two things. Number one, I need to know that the results are non-deterministic, that I can't rank number one, quote unquote. But number two is I do need to know how I can influence it by making sure that my business is mentioned by a third party, relevant, high authority third party is even better. And the more that I'm talked about, the more likelihood that I appear in these queries and these prompts.
You know what's amazing about what you just said is that is also very much the advice we give a lot of people for ranking in their Google business profile is looking at a lot of the same sources of you know that relevance across the internet.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a whole new thing that
Yeah.
you or someone is having to do. It's if anything, sort of a temp check to make sure that all those things are in place
Yeah.
and have correct information and
Well,
whatnot.
if I asked you for a recommendation for a handyman or a hot water heater repair person,
Oof, too soon.
um, too soon. But if I'm asking you for a recommendation and you give me one, there's two things that I know objectively to be true. Number one, it's a real business, right? And number two, it's reputable. I objectively know that because you would not have given me that recommendation otherwise, right?
Hmm.
AI and Google search, by extension, they are also trying to solve for those two problems. And so if I know that as an operator, well, number one, how do these tools know that I'm a real business? Well, having a website helps. Having a Google Business Profile helps. Having a Bing Places profile helps. Having an Apple Maps profile helps. Having a Yelp profile helps. Having a Facebook profile helps. These are all things that help these tools, Google Search, Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, helps these tools know that you are a real business. So that's number one. And then number two, at reputable, yeah, that's reviews. Make sure that every time your business is mentioned, that is mentioned next to a 5-star rating, that your managers get called out by name on these review platforms. Like, whoa, Shelly is awesome. Brett, you're freaking cool. Shane helped me unpack and gave me water. These are all things that help these tools understand how good, how reputable a business is. So it really comes down to those two things, that verification
Mm.
process of or number one, is this a real business? And number two, is it a reputable business? Those two things happen in conjunction. And if you think about asking a friend or your mom for a recommendation, you objectively trust those two things. And these AI tools are just really trying to recreate that experience. And Google has really done a great job of solving that problem, because if we all ask Google for storage near me or pizza near me, and Google gave bad advice, we stop using
Yeah,
that
they're
tool.
incentivized that it's at least usable, workable.
Yes, there you go.
Somehow, Tommy, we have almost burned through this hour. So much to talk about. We might have to do a part two here. What I
I
would love to do maybe in these last 10 to 15 minutes would be to do sort of a tight drive-by of what you see being used, what kind of tools. We talked a lot about kind of the front side, the external
Yes.
impact of AI, but I know that you have had some conversations, been talking to some mid-size operators and some of the rates of how they're using AI tools internally. So if we could do like a quick drive-by of those, even those concepts, and
Yeah.
then maybe if you want to tag on like is there anything there for the independent operator?
Love that.
Like, is that even a tool that's available to them right now or useful to them? And if so, maybe that's where we land the plane is like, what are those things that
I
feel especially relevant right now?
I love that lens of is it available and then is it even worthwhile, right? Because just because it's available doesn't necessarily mean I need to adopt it today, right? Because for me, for the different reasons, it might not make sense. But yeah, so over the last few months, fortunately, I personally, but StoragePug as a company, we kind of have like the front row seats to what's happening. Sometimes we're on stage and we get to be an actor in it and drive the machine, but when we're not driving the machine or we're not acting on stage, we get front row seats to what's happening. And so we have some really incredible, cool Pug Pack who many of y'all are in this audience and listen to the replay. And we're just friends with the industry, right? From big and small. And so over the last 3 6 months, we've interviewed operators with as small as one single facility to big, massive third-party management operators who have 600 plus, all the way to the REITs. So we've interviewed every segment in the industry, and we've compiled a really cool resource and a list of how AI is being used today. So we're not talking forecasting, we're not talking what's going to happen in 6 months, 2 years, 5 years. We're talking today. And so, but again, the big caveat or the big asterisk that I want to state here is that just because other people are doing it doesn't mean I need to do it too, right? There's a lot of evaluation that needs to happen before I adopt things, but I'll throw out a few of them. So, number one, the most kind of ubiquitous one across a lot of these operators, big and small, is AI voice agents, meaning I can either chat with the AI on my website, which was kind of like the first gen. That was like generation one. And then that's morphed and evolved into voice conversation. So like I can call the store, and instead of talking to a real live person, I'm talking to an agent. And there's pros and cons to this. So don't hear me say these cool things, they don't know, all of these don't necessarily have the storage pug or the Tommy Nguyen stamp of approval. But I do want to share what's happening, right? And so one operator who has about 100 facilities, they said that 50% of their phone calls are handled by the AI agent since they've
Wow,
launched it, which,
50%.
which is a lot of phone calls across 100
Wow.
locations, right? So when you think about the business efficacy or the efficiency, that's huge, right? And so when I dug a little deeper, what they're referencing is customers who call because their gate code's not working, customers who call because they want to pay their bill, right? Yeah, I think those are great use cases for AI. I mean, honestly, it's perfect use case for a tool because now it frees up your manager's time and they can do other things, right? Now that said, 50% is nice, but there's the other 50% where the customer is potentially couldn't solve their problem with AI, or worse, are inflamed, right? And I'm reminded of a recent experience that Tyler and I had just last week, or Richard and I had last week, where we went to San Antonio. We wanted to have dinner at this awesome place, and we talked to an AI agent, and the AI agent could not get us a seat. And by the time we escalated it, we went to a voicemail box and got hung up on, right? And so there, and that's happening too, right? And so so that's why I want to put a little disclaimer, like, yes, this thing exists. You should evaluate it to see if it fits your operation. So that's number one. So AI voice conversations, whether it's a voice or chat interface, that's happening. And that's been around the chat has been around for a number of years.
Mhm.
The AI voice agents really picked up steam in Q4 of 2025. And so we're going to see a lot more of that happening for operators big and small. The second thing that we're seeing is revenue management. And this is more applicable to the very large operators who have gobs and gobs and gobs of data. and revenue and gobs of money to pay for data scientists. But dynamic pricing, variable pricing, pricing by market, pricing by hour, pricing by day. These are tools that the largest operators have access to. Not quite fully available for independent operators. No one has released such a tool that I can just go install in my system and just turn it on and it works. There's variations. There are companies out there that offer this kind of service, but it's not something that I can pay $200 a month for. We're talking thousands of dollars per month for, and it may not work out of the box because your data or your market is not big enough, frankly. Right? If you have 400 units, that's not as much as Extra Space, who have 4,000 locations times 800 units per location, right? So like you can just imagine the scale there, but that is happening. And then the third, I'll give four. So that the third one is reputation management using AI, and
Mm.
that includes monitoring of your reputation, responding to reviews. Right. So like we've talked about this for ages. It feels like our very first talk on Google Business Profile a decade ago was about getting reviews, but not just getting reviews, responding to reviews. In 2026, that's still a big deal. And what responding to reviews does is twofold. One, it shows the platform that you are an engaged business owner. An engaged business owner is more likely to be reputable and easier to recommend. But the second part of that is it provides engagement for users who find you. So it's not just appeasing Google or appeasing Bing or appeasing Yelp. It's really to indicate to consumers that find those reviews that, oh, wow, this Tyler guy is really nice. He's always responding to his customers. That's a nice little flag. It's a little signal of trust, which any chance you can to build trust because everything communicates, big deal, right? So
Mm.
reputation management is already available and it's happening big and small. Small operators are using this. Large operators are using this. And of course, when you get a 1-star review, and we didn't, we'll get into this in a moment, but the 1-star reviews do and should we do recommend a human stepping in and taking care of that customer. And then the last bit of AI. So what were the three so far, Tyler? We talked about
You had
customer
the AI voice agent,
AI
revenue
voice.
management, reputation management,
Yep.
and then
So revenue management, reputation management, and then the last bit of AI that we're seeing again, operators big and small use is planning purposes. And so what that means is, hey, we want to create a social media game plan. Cool. Let
mm,
me get on here and do that. Hey, we want to create a game plan for emergency communication because we have a snowstorm. Well, great. Let's do that. Hey, we want to create a strategy for. I mean, I saw some comments earlier in the live chat of, hey, we want to we want to update our Google Ads strategy, and then here's our data. Can you help us do that? We're seeing operators do that big and small. So like those are like today 2026 people and operators are using those things in real time. I'll throw a bonus. I said four, but I'll throw in a bonus because I think this one's really cool. And yeah, this was more of a larger operator thing, but I think this applies to small operators too. Is it's less of a customer service or customer voice agent, but it's call monitoring and call reviews. So you
mm,
kind of have your own like built-in secret shopper that happens on every interaction. So you know how we all have like the call like logging notes from a Zoom meeting or from a Teams meeting. You have the nice little note summary. Well, there are phone systems available today that will automatically transcribe, grade, and send a summary of that call to whoever needs to see it. And so you can kind of have your own secret service, not secret service, Mr. Miss Secret.
sure, that too.
Yeah, you
You're
probably do
not
that
wrong.
too. A bunch of robots running around. You can have your own mystery shopping experience built into your operations, and you can use that not from a like a gross, icky, like spying kind of way, but really in a way that's like helps you coach your team,
Yeah.
and really in a way to provide great, high quality service each and every time, and find little gaps and opportunities. So I guess those are the five. So AI voice and chat agents. You got revenue management tools, reputation management tools, planning tools, and of course, the last one there was mystery shopping and quality assurance tools. Those are all being used today from an operations perspective that it's kind of exciting. And again, big asterisks, and I've said this multiple times now, not all of those tools are a good fit for every business. Much like there's no such tool that's good for every business, and I think depending on the size, the location, the market that you're in, and also the amount of like necessity, we have to ask that. Like, do we need this? Right?
Yeah.
I'm sitting happy at 94% occupancy, and my managers are awesome. They get paid a good salary, and they take care of my customers and they really care. Do I need to do these things? Right? Would it help? Like, the question I would ask there is like, if I had this thing, would it augment my manager so they can even do a better job? I think that's the real question to ask if I'm an operator, is like, how can this tool augment and help my team do better and or do more? And more is not always better. And the wrong question to ask is like, how can I replace my team? Or, hey,
Yeah.
how can I cut this expense item? And the expense item is salary. I think those are the wrong questions, and I think the businesses that are asking those questions are in for a world of trouble long term. And that's my personal take. And this is our platform, so I can share my personal take.
Yeah.
But that's my take, and I think by extension, that's StoragePug's take. Is the question that we're asking should not be how can I replace this person. The question is how can I augment this person? Because if I'm putting myself in someone who works at a place's shoes, yeah, I want to be an A+ player. I want to do the best that I can, and I want every tool available to me. And so hopefully, not hopefully, what we're seeing is the best operators are thinking about it from that lens and not from the human replacement lens. Because
Yeah.
ultimately, at the end of the day, there's human judgment that's hard to replace by a machine.
Mhm.
There's human interaction that customers crave, right? I hate calling the hotel and get an AI agent. That's not a fun experience for me. And so we as humans, the more that we're inundated with tech and AI and robots, we kind of crave the, hey, shoot the breeze a little bit. Like, hey, how's your mom? How's the kids? Like, those kind of interactions for me as an extrovert, of course, I love those, and it's fun, right? And so and potentially could be again, I'm speaking directly now to the small operators, could be a competitive advantage. And there are a few like, when we look down all the things that we all do as businesses, as self-storage businesses, there are genuinely very few competitive advantages. We all sell 10 by 10 sheet metal rooms. Period, right? I mean, it's really that simple. But ultimately, potentially a competitive advantage is all the big operators saw an expense cutting opportunity and moved and shifted fully to AI agents. Consumers are frustrated because AI agents, the state of the art is just not there yet. Eventually, one day it might get there, but it's just not there as far as 2026 goes. Now I have a potential competitive advantage. And that's something I can market and something that I can just do. That's just how I choose to run my business. Right. So,
Yeah.
anyways, as an independent operator, in a funny way, the lack of adoption of some of these tools might lead to an advantage that I have, at least short term. It may not be a forever term, but potentially for the short term.
Well, it makes me think hearing you talk about that, like we've seen sort of happen in other industries. Like, let's pick on food or something really obvious where it's like, yeah, you have fast food that is, mass produced and we know the quality is less. And every quarter they're thinking about how they can shave off a few more cents,
Yes.
even at the expense of the quality of the experience, because they're ultimately answering to a shareholder or to whoever, which they're allowed to do. But then you have a local burger spot. They can maybe have something that's double the price, but people still choose it. Why? Because they want it, not just because it's like they're performing. It's like, oh, this is a better burger, you know.
It,
And I think it's very likely that we'll continue to see that sort of split in a lot of industries
yeah.
where consumers just choose the businesses that align with what is most important to them. And if someone absolutely wants the cheapest possible scenario, maybe you might not be it, but also maybe that's okay. And that,
Yeah.
your business can do just well being who you are and being in your community
So
and,
real.
being connected to like you're saying, being available, being a human maybe.
I mean, the
Um,
conscious consumer, there are gonna be more of those, for a long time when,
And
the
not even just constant, I would say just annoyed.
I
Like you're
just
talking about the AI, just as like not even someone that doesn't care at all about
just a
anything else other like,
frustrated
I cannot
consumer. Yeah.
stand another AI agent. So I'm gonna if I can drive to your facility and talk to a person, by God, take my
Sign
money,
me up,
even if
baby.
it's
Yes.
$20 more a month. I just don't want to deal with all of this.
Yes.
I could absolutely see people
Ab
behaving that way out of just frustration.
And I think it's worth mentioning, right, from an economics perspective, right? The large operators are the ones, or the really tech-enabled operators. There is, like, there's terminal velocity, or, like, there's some amount of percentages there where it's just gonna work out no matter what we do, right?
Mhm.
McDonald's, they can continue to put out slop and it's going to be okay. Their CEO, their whole meme recently of the CEO eating the burger, they're going to be fine. Q1 earnings are going to roll out and they're probably going to have best Q1 ever, right? Like, there's some percentage where at some point that's just going to be. So, like, if we're talking about the big REITs, the Extras, the Publics, the Cube, and of course, Public just bought NSA or announced the acquisition. These things, these big operators, at some point, no matter what they do, to some degree, obviously, right, they're going to be just fine because there's enough, there's a mass adoption where the numbers just work in their favor, right? But at the same time, there are still going to, like Tyler said, there will be the consumer who's either annoyed or frustrated, or the consumer who wants something real and something nice, right? Like the burger joint in town, local burger joint. Like, will it be harder for them? Absolutely, right? Like there are not very many local burger joints because of fast food chains, but they're the ones that exist and the ones who've been there for decades and generations. There's reasons for that, and I think a lot of that is a connection with the consumer base, connection with how and what their customers love, and the consumer, and the connection with how they want to do business. It's who they are. It's just, we have made a stance, and I think we as business owners, we as operators, we can say, draw a line in the sand or throw a stake in the ground that says, this is how I want to do business. And sometimes that's great, sometimes it may not be great, but when it aligns well with your customer and your market, it kind of is nice. It's beyond, to me, it's beyond product market fit, right? It's beyond checking the boxes of like, oh, we offer this thing that people need. It's like, no, we do that, but also, like, these people just like working with us. And when I think back of, like, the different versions of StoragePug, all right, the earliest days. I mean, we were just in San Antonio. I'll tell a quick story here. I know we're running out of time, but we were in San Antonio last week, and it really reminisced a little bit because I walked into the convention hall lobby. I was like, wait a minute, I've been here before. Because up until that point, I was like, I think we've been here, but I don't know for sure. But as soon as I walk in the middle, I know exactly where we are because I have pictures from a decade
Mhm.
ago, and it's like, yeah, we met people at that conference 10 years ago that had no idea who we were, but wanted to support us because they liked either our vibes, or they just wanted to support the underdog, or they wanted to support someone new who's actually coming in and doing something fun, or we were just naive enough to go out and do things, right? And so either way, we were able to grow, not our fan base per se, but people who wanted to support us. We were able to grow that just by putting ourselves out there and saying, this is how we want to do business. Do you want to be part of the club? And that's kind of ballooned and snowballed into what we're doing here, and allowed us to launch education platforms like Storage Academy and Storage Academy Live, and just all these things. We wouldn't be able to do that if we early on didn't plant a stake in the ground. Say, I think this is how we want to do business. We want to
Mm.
be friendly. We want to be people first, and we want to take care of people. And we come at it with this curiosity and this, hey, we're going to figure it out kind of mentality. And I think as operators in self storage, we have opportunities to say similar things to our markets and our customers.
That's awesome, and that feels like a good spot to sort of round out our conversation. Any Do you have any sort of, like, final thoughts for our friends? So, yeah, that's kind of the value takeaway, but any other sort of summary of the practical takeaways
Yeah,
for our friends today?
I'll give you 3 practical things that you can do today that I think will help shape the future, because again, we all can build the future together, right? So number 1 is, like, be familiar with the tool, and not be the familiar and just like, "Oh, yeah, I log in to use ChatGPT all the time." That's fine, but be familiar in the sense of, like, pretend to be a consumer and search for storage, and in fact, search for your storage business and understand what the AI knows about your business. So that's number 1. Number 2, ask AI to tell you about your competitors. So then now you know more about your competitors. And then thirdly, ask AI to say, "Hey, what do my competitors have that I don't have?" So now you can perform a gap analysis. And that right there, those 3 things are going to help you do better in business over the next 6 months. And in doing so, while you're doing it, you're going to have a much better understanding how AI sources and pulls together these facts. And again, I recommend you use Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, all these tools. Use them all because they all do different things in similar things in different ways. So the summary again was: ask AI about you, about your business. Ask AI about your competitors, and then number three, ask AI to do a gap analysis of your competitors and your business to see what's missing, because there's probability that you do the thing that AI doesn't think that you do. I did this with a client as recent as Tuesday. There's a group in North Carolina, and the AI did not know that this particular operator offered a free moving truck. They didn't know that this particular operator sold boxes and supplies, right? And they do both of those things. And so the question is like, okay, well, where, then now you can start to, begin to solve that problem. So number one, we need to make that a lot more transparent and clear on their website. We need to make sure that the Yelp page mentions these things. We need to make sure that the Google business profile mentions these things. And then, and funny enough, it was sourcing the data from their Chamber of Commerce website. So then we need to make sure the Chamber of Commerce website mentions those things, right? So all of a sudden we have this nice checklist of things that need to be done. So yeah, ask AI about you, ask your AI about your competitors, do a gap analysis.
Amazing. Feels like an incredible place to sort of book in this, which might be our part one. Thank you, Tommy, for sharing your brain and your perspective. Sorry for these Q&A questions we haven't been able to get to. If you guys want to stick around after we sort of pretend in the session, we can look at some of those. But for those of you here, thanks for hanging out with us today for Storage Academy Live episode 2. Check back in soon. We'll be announcing our next episode sometime in April. It'll be here before you know it. And I hope all of y'all have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Thank you, Tyler. Thanks for being a gracious host.